Welcome back to this session, which focuses on the potential of the embassy for making a difference to research integrity training and education. My name is Natalie Evans, and I'm an assistant professor at Amsterdam UMC Department of Ethics, Law and Humanities, and I'm a work package lead of the stakeholder consultation for EnTIRE. So joining me in this session are three wonderful speakers: Bert Molewijk from Oslo University, Daniel Pisolato from KU Leuven, and Mariëtte van den Hoven from Amsterdam UMC. We will hear all three presentations before the speakers will take questions from the audience together at the end of the session. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Bert Molewijk, Professor of Clinical Ethics and a work package leader in the Virtue Project, which has developed a Train the Trainer program for research integrity. Bert, please start your presentation.
Natalie, thank you for a nice introduction. Can you see my slides, yes. Natalie, and all of you? Thanks again for the invitation to speak a little bit about this virtue training, which also make use of the embassy as just presented by Mark. And I'm really glad that I can present, although short, only 10 to 15 minutes, I'm really glad that I can present you some of the experience from another European project called Virtue. It's a kind of appetizer, and there's a lot of information about this training on the embassy, of course. So one of the goals of this presentation is to guide you to the embassy and to look at all the information about this training. In my talk, I will talk about what is Virtue, what is the project, what did it consist of, why a virtue ethics approach. I think that's specifically important because it's also called Virtue, and the description of the Virtue training program. Again, it's a training program for train the trainers. Okay, what is Virtue? Virtue in the training program, it's a train the trainer in which we train trainers, future trainers, how to foster reflection on the virtues needed to make a good researcher. So we are training trainers that in the future will train trainees or maybe even new trainers to become trainers. Secondly, of course, we will train the trainers how to promote the understanding of the European Code of Conduct of Research Integrity. So both virtues and the knowledge of the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity are integrated in this training. It's, of course, as I said, a virtue ethics approach. Trainers are taught to understand the importance of virtues and how to develop virtues in practice. So virtues among researchers. It's a training focusing on learning by doing. So instead of merely teaching or giving lectures, trainers themselves experience the program that they have to teach later on. So first they function as a kind of participants, they experience the training, also the learning modules and the exercise, and later on they will be the trainer and teach those trainings, this training to the students. And it's learning-centered teaching. That's also very, I think, relevant, especially for the embassy, because trainees can select the materials on the embassy and do exercises that fits within their, well, specific country or cultural background or expertise of their students. So again, the embassy here is really useful because within the embassy, as Mark said, you can select some of the material from this training, or you can even change some of the material for your own country. So why then a virtue ethics approach? There is, of course, already some training available on research integrity, and my follow-up speaker will talk about it after myself. But virtue ethics approach is important in this training because research integrity as a concept is particularly, how to say, challenging to grasp, because it's difficult to know what good research integrity entails in practice, in concrete situations. This is not merely due to the well-known fact that in concrete situations you always need to apply the meaning and implications of concepts and rules and norms related to research integrity. Yet it's also related to the epistemological nature of research integrity as such. Research integrity is not an empirical entity that we can easily measure or calculate, or something can point to, this is clearly research integrity and this isn't. So it's always a matter of interpretation. And for this interpretation, you need, of course, knowledge about research integrity, but it's not enough. You also need virtues and character, or like Aristotle described, phronesis, so practical wisdom to apply the knowledge and also to fit it with your own professional identity as a trainer. So again, this virtue training is of course about knowledge of research integrity. It's also about knowledge of virtue ethics, but the most part is doing exercises in which you develop your own virtues and characters, how to interpret what is good research integrity. This training is focusing on complexities and dilemmas in real life. It's not about theoretical conceptions or definitions. Of course, we have material on that on the embassy, but the training itself focuses really on the real life research dilemmas concerning research integrity. And we try to develop their moral sensitivity, the goals of the profession and the research qualities that support those goals. So that's an important element, that this training is training moral sensitivity among researchers, and as a matter of fact, of course, also among the trainers themselves. So we aim, with this training, we aim to develop the character qualities of a virtuous researcher. And of course, there are different viewpoints on what kind of character qualities are needed, and I will tell about it later on. So my last part and the most extensive part is about the training, to give you an impression about this training. As said before, all is available in open access on the embassy, so you can have a look at it afterwards. We created a kind of toolbox for trainers, a toolbox in which people can use online e-learning modules, but also offline participatory exercises for different goals, for example, for different learning goals. And as I said before, that you can adapt the text and the instructions and the training materials towards your own context. The larger learning goals for trainers for this training is, first of all, to identify the core principles and practice of the European Code of Conduct, understand the core virtue ethics concepts and terms, including, of course, the reason why we choose for a virtue ethics approach, relate research integrity then to concepts of virtue ethics, and then engage in case-based and experiential exercises aimed at fostering reflection on virtues. And not only merely reflection, of course, but also developing those quality characteristics. In the end, we also uphold scientific virtues in research practice. So we aim to contribute in this way to uphold scientific virtues. This is a kind of schematic overview, and I will talk you through the different steps of this training. The training starts with online modules. There are several modules. Then there's a kind of participatory sessions in which people either online or live in a physical context come together and do these participatory exercises, the concrete cases which they experience themselves. And then the trainers or future trainers, they practice these exercises with their students. Then there is again a final participatory session within the training in which we help the future trainers to reflect upon their practice. And finally, the trained trainers will train others, of course. So first, the online modules. I will not talk about every module, but there are 14 e-learning modules available on the embassy. And it's focusing on individual learning and reflection. There is an introduction to the main concepts and principles of the virtue training. Of course, there's an introduction to the ECOG, and it's all quite interactive, so people can react to what is presented there. There are also thematic pages, as you can see here. There are instructions and videos about the material itself, but also about the exercises. Here you see 4 of them, and I will, as I said, I will not explain or talk about every e-learning module, but you can see the kind of topics that we try to catch in those e-learning modules. All presented and all developed by the consortium of the Virtue Consortium. You see it's a kind of combination of research integrity focus. This is more about virtues focus itself, virtue ethics and how they are thought, but also about some empirical research, very interesting, about why we justify unethical behavior, for example, or how to make a virtue of necessity. And also specifically on supervision and mentoring. Again, all those e-learning modules are available. And then if you go to the first participatory session, then there are on the embassy 5 participatory exercises developed during this virtue project together with the whole consortium. And I will briefly describe those 5 exercises. It's important though to understand that the virtue training, as I said before, it's not one size fits all training. So if, for example, a trainer or specific group wants to select only 3 of those exercises or 4, they can of course select material for the trainer they want to give later on by their own. So they can select it. So also the way of how much time they spend is sometimes depends on the specific situation.
Bert, can I just stop you? There's 1 minute left. All our speakers have 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. I will finish up. So the debate and dialogue is a short exercise in which the debate and dialogue is exercised. It's really nice because it's not about talking about, but it's really doing. Then there is the modified Rotterdam dilemma game, really interesting, with many different kinds of dilemmas in which people can talk about those dilemmas without inserting their own dilemmas. Self-declaration approach developed in Oslo, in which we talk about different types of goodness and good research and good researcher. Virtue and norms, where norms, moral norms and virtues are coupled and compared to each other. And finally, the middle position, in which people focus on the ambiguity of virtue itself, whether, for example, you can be too honest or too little honest or whatever. Really nice exercise, and I really invite you to have a look at it. Then, as I said, the trainers will exercise these exercises, with their own practice. And then finally, there is a session together in which we reflect, or maybe still some learning needs with how to use the exercises or how to use the e-learning modules. In the end, then we tried that all trainers train 10 researchers in their own country. So this is a kind of slide that shows you how in the virtual consortium we were able to train many trainers in Europe, and those trainings are still going on. So if you are interested in becoming a certified trainer, please contact us, and you can find the information on the training page. Here you see the training page on the embassy. Here's a certificate that people get when they are finished after following it. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm open for any discussion or questions from your side. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. And sorry to rush you, Bert, that you had to explain such a complicated training in such a short period of time. And we're going to go straight to the next presentation, and the questions will come at the end of the session. So now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Daniel Pisolato. So Daniel is a bioethicist working in a number of EU research integrity projects, including Virtue, which has just been described, and also SOPS for RI, which is a project developing guidelines and standard operating procedures for research integrity for EU institutions. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalie. I will share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
That's good. So in this presentation, we are going to focus mainly on the collection of openly and freely available research integrity training materials we have on the Embassy of Good Science. I will give you an overview about why it's important to have this collection, about the way in which we collected all the resources and what you can find and what the resources you can find in our collection. First, up to now, we have uploaded more than 200 educational resources divided in single training material, but also collections of different combinations of training materials. Why it is important? So within the platform, having this collection is important because it's a way first to gather all the online training resources that are online. Second, it provides ready-to-use resources for research integrity and research ethics to help single researchers and to help also research teams in dealing with specific issues concerning different topics, concerning specific disciplines, or concerning also the research they are doing. But also those resources might be helpful to help departments and faculties and also institutions in organizing research integrity training by using research integrity material already available. The collection was made by first, we had a look at what was developed by other European funded projects on research integrity and what other universities were using in their own research integrity training. Second, we started looking using Google at all the freely available online research integrity training material by focusing on resources in English or subtitled in English. Third, we have the need to define some characterization criteria in order to describe on the platform the educational resources. So an example of these criteria are the where or the when the resource was developed, the authors, if the training material is addressing a specific topic or a specific virtue, and also if the training material is customized for a specific discipline. Finally, thanks to an effort made by the all consortium member, we have to assess each research integrity educational material in order to give the audience a full description, a complete description of all resources you can find on the platform. Related to what you can find and related to the typologies of resources there are in our collection, you can find online books. Within our collections, there are online trainings, for instance, a training on research in humans or a online training on research data management developed by the University of Edinburgh. There are online publications, but there are also single case studies, but also a collections of case studies. Collection of case studies such as the one you can find on the COPE website. Within our collection, there are also online movies, like on being a scientist, created during the Printiger project, or interactive movies, like the interactive movie The Lab. There are also small videos, for instance, like the one you can find on the YouTube platform or on the TED platform, or specific research integrity videos you can find on a specific website for research integrity. Moreover, within our collection, you can find learning card games, such as the one developed by the Path to Integrity project, or the more famous Dilemma game developed by the University of Rotterdam. Also, there are single podcasts or even collections of podcasts, such as the one on bioethics developed by the University of Oxford. Related to disciplines and topics, the majority of our collection our resources is not customized for any specific disciplines. And these resources are mainly addressing topics such as research misconduct, publication ethics, data management, or collaborative research. The other two main topics addressed within our collections are related to research with humans and research with animals. These two precise topics, of course, are within specific resources customized for biomedical science. Besides this specific customization, in our collections, there are resources customized for humanities, there are customized for social sciences, natural sciences, engineering, but also there are a couple of resources customized for the administrative staff. If you're looking for something specific within our collection, you don't have to go through all the collection, but you just need to filter what you are looking for, depending on your need. You can have a look at the resources for PhD student or senior researchers. You can filter depending on the research area. You can filter depending on if you're looking for resources addressing a specific virtue or a specific good research practice. Of course, we know that our collection so far has its own limitation, because since we are just scratching the top of the iceberg, since the research entirety resources you can find on internet, the number of the resources is very vast, and we did this collection is in a limited period of time. Moreover, so far we focused on resources just on English or subtitled in English without taking into consideration resources in other languages. But the good news is that we can still increase the number of the resources within our collection just by clicking on the tab Add Resource. So even each of you can help us in order to improve the platform and in order to increase the number of the resources to help other researchers and other research teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for that wonderful presentation. And we'll take the questions at the end of the session if anybody wants to ask you some questions. Someone asked you for the URL, which I pasted into the chat, so you don't have to answer the question about the URL. So now we go to our final speaker of the session, and that is Mariëtte van den Hoven. Mariëtte is Professor of Medical Philosophy and Ethics and Head of the Department of Ethics, Law and Humanities at Amsterdam UMC. Mariëtte is also the PI of the European H2020 project Integrity, which focuses on empowering students through evidence-based scaffolded learning of responsible conduct in research. Mariëtte, you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Natalie. So I chose a different template to also immediately show you. This is the template actually of the education within the Amsterdam UMC, to show you that I am part and not part of this project. And indeed, I'm the coordinator of a project called Integrity. But let me shortly say something about my own role. And the outline of the talk is quite easy, I think. I want to take a bit of the layperson's perspective on this educational part on the Embassy of Good Science, and think along with you, if you take different perspectives, then what is actually desired or needed, what can I imagine that would be desired or needed, and how can the Embassy currently accommodate for that, and how can we move towards a future more interactive community if the Embassy would like to be that, as it is wiki-based. And then I will sketch you a few scenarios. Maybe that's enough already as food for thought and some discussion. So a bit of context about me, why I chose this different template already. I have one leg into the Embassy project, since I am since a few weeks a member of the board of the foundation of the Embassy. So I have a great interest in carrying out the work of the Embassy towards the future. I'm also chairing the network of educational developers in the Netherlands. So I also have a high interest in improving and stimulating the quality of education on RCR. And I'm also the coordinator of this project called Integrity, of which I'm not going to say much about it right now. So if I take this layperson's perspective on the Embassy of Good Science, and thank you for both presenters who presented earlier about both the trainings and the huge bulk that is already available with all kinds of materials on the Embassy, then you see that the trainer session is actually focusing on 3 different blocks. It's about the virtue training program, it's about literature and tools, and it's about a training community. And that's already an interesting division. But if you enter the page, it's not immediately clear what you will find. So it's not immediately clear if I would enter as a teacher, where I can find some tools or what can be used for which kind of target groups. And the menu that was just shown sometimes pops up with some strange codes, for example, with regarding to guiding the disciplines. But overall, I have a very good impression. There's a lot of good material hiding under this educational tab that you can click. And an offer for a training is, I think, a very good idea, given the huge need that there still is, and many universities are still fully developing all kinds of courses and trainings. So people are searching for something like that. So I can fully understand what Mark was saying earlier about the number of hits of this page, because I think there is indeed a huge need. But maybe in the future, something like an assistant pop-up could be helpful, because I could not always immediately find my way. And I think of myself as a kind of a dummy on most of the websites that I visit. Now, let me take a few perspectives. These are all stock-free photos. Oh, let's go back. Let me take a teacher perspective. So imagine I'm a teacher and I want to teach more about research integrity, and I'm in a need of materials and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Then one fact, I think, of most teachers is that most of the teachers always like to have autonomy. They want to decide the structure of the courses themselves. They only want some input, so they would like to have some tools and ideas or perspectives on a certain topic, but they want to be the final responsible person to decide how their course will be structured and how it will be taught. So full-blown courses might not be immediately what teachers are after. But new teachers in the field might be in the need of some training how to teach research integrity, or my preference is to call it responsible conduct of research. So the offer to have something like virtue trainings and maybe other trainings as well in the near future is, I think, a very good idea. And then teachers may also be in need of a community to share their experiences and to improve their courses or their teaching materials. And I think that that is also well thought through in the current website. Now, let us move to a different kind of perspective. So you could also take a participant's or a student's perspective. And I think that this perspective is still lacking, and it might be an open question if you really want to involve that. But it could be that students or participants are voluntarily or obligatory visiting the site as a part of a course because they have to do a certain kind of assignment. And then the question is, can these participants really navigate themselves to the relevant parts of a course that they are supposed to do, or will they need clear hyperlinks so that we can expect them not to become wandering over the site page? And I think they need hyperlinks, actually, as it currently is being set up. But could they on their own find more courses if they are interested? I think it currently is not, and it might be something that we would like to accommodate in the future. And they might also need a community or interaction with other participants, if I would take the participant perspective interested in integrity courses. Now, take another kind of perspective. In some of the Horizon Europe projects that are calls that are currently ongoing, you already see the broadening the scope to policymakers, and I've seen that Niels Meijgaard is also talking tomorrow about standard operating procedures. But imagine that I'm a policymaker within a university, and I am in need for something like a policy on trainings on research integrity. Then I have a different kind of perspective. So I want to know what kind of programs on the RCR are default in many universities, for whom, so who will be targeted, how to sustain such programs, how to embed them within the university, etc. And I might be in need to see some good practices, and also possibly with which universities or associations of universities have adopted which kind of policies. How can I then find my way quickly in this education part of training? I'm not really sure what the answer to that will be. Now the question is, can the embassy accommodate for all these kinds of different perspectives? Is the sky the limit? Well, currently it's not, but you could say at least 3 things could be already and captured in the taken care of in the current setup of the embassy. First of all, it provides you with information, and it was already said by Daniel that you need to keep this information up to date. So that's a kind of responsibility of the persons who are contributing to the embassy, and that could be all of us potentially, but now it has been this EnTIRE project to start with. Secondly, you would also like to stimulate high quality trainings in RCR. And if you want to stimulate high quality, then we might also add something like how to evaluate the information that you provide, or how to define what good RCR education entails, or even to help educational research for the different types of educational tools or courses that are being offered. And that's a different kind of role or task that could also be maybe taken into account by the embassy. I'm not sure. It's just trying to give you some food for thought. And a different kind of role could be to stimulate the teaching community to become active and contribute. So that's the Wikibase idea. As I understand it, you want other people to become active and to keep the info up to date, to add their own teaching tools and to help stimulate educational research. Now, if we bring this together, then I can imagine that for the future, there are different scenarios possible. It could be, and this would be, I think, the least attractive one, but it is a very obvious first role for the embassy, that it will be kind of a digital encyclopedia. People will use it as a kind of a desk book to look for tools, to look for information, but no, they will not give an active contribution. And that's a scenario you might not like, but it's a very likely scenario if you have a lot of on offer that people will easily come and consume. Or it could turn into a kind of a search engine the moment that you mainly put in hyperlinks to all kinds of websites, then the embassy is becoming mainly the portal to help you find your way on the web pages that have more info. And these are both scenarios that we could go beyond, I think. So, and then the question is, where do we want to be heading? So that's also up for the discussion. Do we want the embassy to turn into a do-it-yourself kit for teachers, where they can find a lot of tools and information and share that also amongst each other? Then it's mainly a teacher's focused kind of educational part of the embassy, you could say. Or could we even turn it into a bit of more active, like a course platform for teachers, students, and policymakers, where it becomes an attractive site where courses are neatly ordered and one can interact at training level and at the developer level? Well, it's a kind of a rhetorical question, I think, where my own preferences would be. I think that the last scenario is, and there are many other different scenarios possible, but the last scenario is at least attractive as a future kind of ideal, but how realistic this is, I'm not sure. That's also something up for discussion, I would say. Okay, that was my presentation, and thank you very much for listening to it.
Thank you, Mariëtte. I'd like to now invite all of our speakers to turn on their cameras. I see we don't have any questions from the audience. Guy sent me a question via the chat because he couldn't access the question and answers function as a panelist rather than a participant. So I have one question so far, and that is to Mariëtte. But I also feel that Mariëtte has asked a lot of questions, so perhaps we do not need the questions from the audience, because Mariëtte has also provided that function and given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of ideas to mull over, and some nice pertinent questions. So perhaps before going to Guy's question, I'll put just Mariëtte's sort of broader question of what do we feel that the embassy should provide in terms of training? What is it, the core that the embassy can provide for research integrity or responsible conduct research trainings? So I will ask that of Daniel, I think, and also Bert can also answer. And this is, I think, the core of Mariëtte's presentation, if you'll let me summarize. Daniel, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so I was just thinking in terms of education, of course, the embassy can provide all kind of information regarding different disciplines, different topics and so on, but I don't know, because one suggestion from Mariëtte was, okay, how we can define which is the best way to train students or the best resource to train students. I was thinking that can be nice to have a kind of a ranking system from outside to see what is the more that can be the more useful resource. Yeah, probably something is lacking, and the Virtue project is providing a lot about regarding content. This kind of content are resources with the virtue ethics approach. Something is really lacking within our collection. But about the future of the platform, I mean, there are a lot of options, as Mariëtte said, and we need just to work for the best one.
Maybe I'll also ask you to answer Anna Marusik's question that she's put into the question answers, which is, what is the best way to integrate research integrity training into official courses, especially undergraduate courses, to prepare and train future researchers? How adaptable are the resources on the embassy?
I think that's also a question for Daniela.
Yeah,
I think that's a question
because the only way, to make them official are to make them mandatory. But you cannot. I mean, it's a long shot for embassy. You can work hard in advertise the platform within the European University Association, just as a way to promote the platform and promote the embassy. But really, I don't have a real answer to this.
Let's put it over to Bert, because also the virtue materials, Bert, are a toolbox of materials that can also be integrated into other courses as well. How would you like to respond to Anna's question?
Yeah, I thought I also respond to the earlier question from Mariëtte later, but I think that it's like Daniel said, you can, if you say that some part of the virtue training that we developed, for some of the exercise or some of the e-learning modules, that you use it as a teacher in your program and make it official within the program, then it becomes a kind of integrated or obligatory element, isn't it? So, and of course, not like Mariëtte rightfully said, not copying the whole training and all the exercise, but some elements of it. And I think, again, we cannot answer this question because it depends on the specific context, the target groups, the students, in which you want to make it formalized or formally integrated in existing programs. But I think that's quite easy. With respect to Mariëtte, what Mariëtte earlier, I really like your questions, Mariëtte, about the different target groups and how they will find or lose their way on the embassy, because the embassy has, of course, a lot of potential and a lot of information. So perhaps maybe it would be, it can be useful to think about, it can be a pop-up interactive something, but also to address specific target groups when they visit the homepage and ask them, for example, whether they are a student, a trainer, a teacher, a researcher, a policymaker. I found those questions from Mariëtte really relevant. And even if we cannot rebuild at the end of this project of EnTIRE, can now rebuild the embassy, I think it will be easy to, for example, give some instructions where they can find specific information for these target groups. So that was my more practical suggestions.
Yeah. Sorry, just to tie in your answer about the assistants, and that ties into the question that Guy asked in the chat, where he says, how does an assistant fit in with the wiki approach? Some instruction is possible, but not in the sense of how can I help you? I'll put that question to Mariëtte.
I think it's rather a question for Mark, actually. It's a technical question. But I was in line with what Bert said. I can imagine we all know the Erasmus Dilemma app, I think. It's very famous, and it has some icons to show what type of case it is, what kind of target group it has. So you have to help teachers who will visit the site to navigate towards the type of topics and audience target groups that they are interested in. And there's also a question about re-educating experienced researchers. I think on purpose, I say participants and not students, because I think that everyone can be targeted with trainings on RI. So there is no need to think that you only need to target PhDs, as many universities do. You can target everyone. You can even target high schools, as we are doing in our project, and Path to Integrity is doing exactly the same. And even that makes sense. But you need to help people to figure out which tools are better suited for which kind of courses. And to come back to Anna's question about how can we best integrate it? Well, Anna, if I combine it with the idea that every teacher who has a responsibility for a course wants to be autonomous as possible and wants to decide on his or her own how that course will look like, then you only need to structure things, but Niels Meijgaard can say a lot more about it, I think, tomorrow, how that best can be done with the subs. But what we need to do is at least bring in the most appealing way the materials and the information that is on offer already on the embassy, and also invite people to contribute themselves on what they have discovered or what they have newly developed, so that it really becomes a growing community where people want to find their resources and their tools to actually integrate these into their courses. So the lab, the film, the interactive movie, The Lab, has done this in the past very well, I think, but it's a terrible movie because it's so moralistic. So we need new materials. And that's where the embassy comes in, I would say.
We have some more questions in the question and answer, which Mariëtte's already touched on the question from our anonymous attendee about the experienced researchers. And I'm not sure if it's the same anonymous attendee, maybe we have multiple. So we have another question. Can these courses also be used by research ethics committees to train their members? Maybe I'll go to Bert, because perhaps you want to talk about virtue and its possibilities for experienced researchers and research ethics committees, and if you know of trainers perhaps that you've been training who are using the materials in this way.
I'm not aware of this. No, your last question. But I think on the one hand, you can, if we talk about virtue training, you can use the elements from the embassy very well for members from RBs or research ethics committees, but of course to a limited sense, because as I said, for the virtue training, it's specifically focusing on virtue ethics approach, and most of the research ethics committees don't have a virtue ethics approach, to say it's mildly. So there are a lot of teaching about norms and laws and how to apply them to specific complex research designs is maybe more at hand. But at the same time, you could say, because some researchers complain about RBs and about research ethics committees, you could say that some of the virtue approaches would be useful for research ethics committee members to really build some nuanced, conclusions or valuations of the research that is submitted, because it's not only about the rules and the laws, it's also about the sensitive issues. So there it could help, but I'm not aware of it. So that's me.
I think some of my trainees have been using them with the research ethics committee.
Please tell us, Natalie.
There's only 3 minutes left and we have another question. So another anonymous attendee asked, based on your experience, do you think there are big differences between the available support structures for researchers in terms of ethics and integrity training and advice across European countries? Is the EU 13 widening countries and targeted support relevant for this topic? So I'm going to open this to anybody, but I think maybe Daniel, because you did look at the differences in the geographic origin of the resources that you collected, if you can have any insights on this. Or if that question is a little bit too difficult, I'm not sure if you have you can disaggregate the data across Europe. Did you find any topics unique to certain countries or certain regions? I think that's something that I'd be really interested to hear as well.
Unique, I really don't remember, but we can say that the majority of the topics, the resources are coming from US and UK, without any doubt, just because they, let's say, English-speaking countries started first developing resources on research integrity. There are new topics that are really getting more and more attention, like, but are really super discipline specific, like lab safety, or even related to research environment, and also related to the environment, because sometimes especially in chemical labs or in specific labs, you are dealing with a huge amount of substances. So also the point of view of the environment, there are let's say new resources. Something quite new are all the the couple of resources for the administrative sector or for the administrative staff in helping researchers in dealing with specific bureaucratic issues, let's say. But no, as far as I remember, there are no specific topics for specific, let's say, specific countries. For sure, there are specific topics or specific resources for specific, developed by specific institutions, but not country related.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I'll have to close the session now. We've run out of time, but it was such a great discussion, a lot of food for thought. And it was really nice, especially just at the end, Daniel's comment about how increasing awareness is showing that new topics are being discussed, there's new materials being developed all the time, and hopefully we'll have these on the embassy as well. So now I'd like to announce a break, and when we come back,